Kale pushed open the door to his quarters, muttering under his breath about how the orbital station's maintenance bots had a personal vendetta against him. One of them had spent the past hours zipping back and forth outside the door, squeaking like it had just discovered existential dread. He leaned against the frame, arms crossed, waiting for whatever had set the automated alarms off this time. The corridor was empty, silent except for the faint hum of the station's life support. He exhaled, convinced he'd been chasing shadows when a soft, deliberate laugh made him freeze. "You're tall," said a voice from the darkness. Kale blinked, trying to process it. The sound was melodic, teasing, but something about it carried an edge of mischief that made his instincts tense. His hand hovered over his sidearm, automatic, reflexive, but curiosity pinned him there. "Who's there?" he asked, the voice gruffer than he intended. A figure emerged, stepping from the shadow. At first glance, she was human, tall and lean, with eyes that caught the low light in a way that felt deliberate, almost knowing. Then his gaze drifted upward, long, elegant ears stretched from the sides of her head, tapering to delicate points. Kale's mouth went dry for a second, then he coughed awkwardly. "Oh, hi." The universe had a strange sense of humor tonight. The woman smiled, tilting her head. "Can I sleep with you tonight, warrior?" Her voice carried that teasing lilt again, like she was both daring him and daring the universe to argue. Kale froze entirely. He could feel the corners of his mind scrambling, trying to sort this as a tactical encounter, but every scenario led to him either flailing or blushing. "Excuse me," he said, trying to sound authoritative while imagining every possible interstellar violation of etiquette. "I'm serious," she said, hands raised slightly, palms open in an almost theatrical gesture of surrender. "I have nowhere else to go, and your quarters seemed safer than the rest." Kale's eyes narrowed. He had been trained to respond to threats with precision, but this was clearly not a threat. It was absurdly audacious, maybe even insane, but also strangely compelling. He tried to think of a protocol. "Why my room? Did the sensors pick up my impeccable taste in room lighting or my excellent taste in instant noodles?" He muttered. The woman laughed, a soft, tinkling sound that made the tension in Kale's shoulders loosen. "Your noodles definitely, also your shoes. Alien scent markers are delicate things." Kale blinked. He had shoes. Apparently, in some alien metric, he did. She stepped fully into the light now, brushing against a panel with her fingertip, making a series of holographic screens flicker. "Also, your room is quieter than the rest of the station, and let's face it, humans are usually terrible at hiding interesting scents. You passed the test." Hale stared. "Interesting scents?" he asked, wishing he had a drink nearby. She grinned and perched herself on the edge of his work desk like it was her throne. "Yes, warrior, your scent is pleasantly boring but safe. I like safe when I'm being hunted." Kale exhaled, a snort escaping as he realized he was laughing at this, laughing at a stranger with pointy ears who had just asked to sleep in his room. His sense of danger, finely tuned over years of combat, found itself entirely sidelined by the ridiculousness of it all. "All right," he said finally, hands on hips, shaking his head. "You can stay the night, but I swear if you touch my—" he gestured vaguely at his personal effects, "anything sacred, I will unleash the full power of my collection of dusty snack packets. And trust me, that's terrifying." The alien woman Lyria, as he would soon learn, clapped her hands in mock horror. Snack packets, humans are positively quaint. They fell into an uneasy, teasing rhythm. Kale pointed out the intricacies of gravity boots, each explanation punctuated by her overdramatic gasps and failed attempts to keep her balance, resulting in him chasing her around the room to prevent minor disasters. At one point, she tripped over his pile of hollow books, sending a low-gravity stack floating like confetti, and Kale had to wrestle her upright while she teased, "You know, humans aren't very graceful when startled." He laughed, conceding the point, and she smirked triumphantly, brushing hair from her eyes. As the night deepened, Lyria settled into a corner of the room, inspecting a strange, humming device Kale had abandoned on his desk. "What does this do?" she asked innocently. He squinted. That's a plasma calibrator. It's boring, don't touch it." She poked it anyway, and the device emitted a soft whine, then blinked like it was embarrassed. "I like it," she said simply. Kale shook his head, realizing that the night would pass slowly and unpredictably with her presence, humor cutting through the unease he usually carried alone. Hours passed with soft, absurd banter. She commented on the quirks of human sleep positions, tried to demonstrate her version of a human blanket fort, and questioned why anyone would invent something as impractical as a spoon when gravity made it possible to just tilt a bowl. Cale found himself laughing more than he had in years. Humor, he realized, had a strange way of taming tension. Toward midnight, the station's quiet hum was punctuated by Lyria's soft sigh as she curled up on the floor, not yet fully lying down on his bed but claiming territory in her own whimsical way. Cale stared, partly amused, partly bewildered. "You're really something, you know that?" he said. She looked up, long ears twitching with faint luminescence under the dim ceiling lights. "I try," she said, eyes glinting. "But tonight, warrior, I just want to sleep somewhere safe, with company, even if it means teasing you endlessly." Cale smirked, conceding silently that he had no choice but to allow her this small rebellion against circumstance. Outside, the station spun silently in the void, its lights casting faint glimmers across the walls. In the room, the warrior and the alien woman settled into a rhythm of uneasy trust, broken occasionally by bursts of laughter as she discovered a new human quirk, or he gave an exaggerated demonstration of correct sleeping posture. Despite the absurdity, Cale felt something shift, an acknowledgement that danger, humor, and intimacy could coexist in small, improbable moments. The night stretched on, slow and unpredictable, the kind of night where humor softened fear and an alien visitor with long ears made a warrior wonder if perhaps the universe was slightly more interesting than he had thought. By the time the first alarmed blink of artificial dawn crept across the floor, Cale found himself sitting cross-legged, staring at Lyria as she finally curled on his bed, her ears brushing the edge of the blanket like delicate antennae. He shook his head, muttering, "What the hell am I getting myself into?" She responded with a sleepy grin, "Sleeping beside a warrior isn't so bad. You snore funny, by the way." Cale groaned and threw a pillow at her, laughing despite himself. And so the night ended, not with heroics or threats, but with the strange, ridiculous, and fragile beginnings of trust between a human soldier and an alien fugitive. Cale woke to the faint hum of the station's life support and the soft, rhythmic tapping of long ears against the edge of the bed frame. Lyria had shifted overnight, curling into a small, almost feral bundle in the corner of the room, her eyes half closed, yet alert in that alien way that made it clear she could hear a flea sneeze in the next sector. She twitched slightly, muttering something that sounded suspiciously like a complaint about gravity calibration, and Cale snorted, realizing that if her sleep talk involved complaints about his messy quarters, he might have to start paying rent to the Intergalactic Cleaning Guild. "You're awake," she said finally, sitting up and stretching with an elegance that somehow managed to mock human anatomy without meaning to. Her ears glowed faintly with bioluminescence, shifting from lavender to soft green as they caught the morning light. "Did you know humans snore in different frequencies depending on mood? It's fascinating." Cale blinked. I don't, maybe I was sleeping." He waved a hand dismissively. "Are you studying me now?" "Observation is vital for survival," she said, hopping onto his desk like it had become her personal stage. She tapped at a hollow panel, sending a three-dimensional projection of the room spinning in midair. "Your quarters are optimized for a single occupant, yet you have at least 6 redundant containment fields for snacks. Fascinating." Cale groaned. "Those aren't redundant. Those are carefully curated defenses against boredom. And they're sacred." Lyria leaned closer, eyes glinting. "Sacred, huh? Is that why you have the holographic fish tank that nobody uses, because it's sacred?" Cale had to laugh, it was true. He'd set it up during a long deployment, thinking it would provide tranquility. Instead, he forgot to feed the fish simulators 3 months ago, and now they floated like plastic ornaments. Lyria pointed at the tank, her grin wicked. "They look peaceful, but I sense rage underneath. Tiny, pixelated rage." Cale rubbed his temples. "You have a weird talent for spotting rage in digital fish." Lyria snorted. "I have many talents, some are useful. Some are entertaining, and a few, like detecting rage in holographic creatures, are purely for amusement. You, warrior, are amusing." By mid-morning, they were engaged in a strange sort of domestic routine. Lyria attempted to prepare a human breakfast using a combination of alien technology and improvised kitchenware, resulting in pancakes that hovered slightly above the plate, quivering like jellyfish. Kale watched in both horror and fascination. "Is that supposed to be edible?" he asked. "It's nutritious," she replied, waving a spatula-like device with authority. "If you want flavor, try not to ask questions." "The flavor is in the quantum resonance." Kale grimaced and took a cautious bite. It wasn't terrible, slightly wobbly, yes, but not lethal. She clapped her hands in triumph. "Success! Your taste buds accept alien culinary experiments. I'll remember this day forever." The humor of the morning did little to mask the unspoken tension that lingered like a shadow across the room. Kale sensed the weight of her presence, an alien who had trusted him enough to stay in his quarters, yet still carrying the danger of the enemies hunting her. Lyria, aware of his thoughts, leaned back and let her ears droop lazily, a subtle sign that she was letting herself relax slightly, but not fully. "You're thinking too hard," she said, breaking the silence. "You humans always overthink hospitality. I didn't come here to turn your life upside down, warrior. I came here because the alternative involved laser traps and considerably less comfortable cushions." She gestured at the floating breakfast, which wobbled in agreement. Kale chuckled, realizing that whatever danger she had escaped, she had a sense of humor sharp enough to diffuse the tension almost entirely. Their morning unfolded in a series of small, absurd discoveries. Lyria tested the gravity calibrators, sending objects floating and spinning across the room while Kale scrambled to catch them, muttering about safety protocols and human insurance policies that probably didn't cover alien-induced levitation accidents. At one point, she tripped over a tangled wire and nearly collided with a wall-mounted holomap. "You humans make peril a hobby," she remarked, brushing herself off and smirking. "I approve, it keeps life exciting." Later, Kale attempted to give her a tour of the station's less hazardous areas, trying to maintain the formalities of a human warrior while subtly keeping her out of sections with experimental propulsion arrays. She wandered with exaggerated caution, examining control panels with playful curiosity, occasionally making a comment about the absurdity of human naming conventions for star systems. "Alpha Centauri, really? You couldn't have called it something snazzier?" she asked. Kale laughed. "You try naming billions of stars without sounding like a toddler with a label maker." Their banter carried through the day, each joke or teasing comment breaking down invisible barriers. Despite the humor, Kale noticed small signs of her alertness: the subtle twitch of her ears when a maintenance bot whirred too close, the way her eyes flicked toward bulkhead entrances as if cataloging escape routes. He resisted the urge to lecture her on station security protocols, knowing that her skills and instincts far exceeded his, and that in the current balance, humor and camaraderie were more valuable than control. As evening approached, the artificial lighting dimmed to mimic a sunset, and the station's external windows framed a ribbon of stars. Lyria settled into the gravity chair by the observation panel, her legs dangling like a child on a swing, ears twitching with interest at the passing asteroid field outside. Kale joined her, leaning against the console, and they fell into an easy silence punctuated by occasional remarks. "You know," she said after a long pause, "this station isn't terrifying when I have company. I expected sterile walls and endless hums. Instead, I have this." She gestured vaguely at the room, her ears brushing the edge of the console. Kale smirked. "By this you mean me tripping over your culinary experiments and failing at gravity containment." "Precisely," she said, her grin wide and mischievous. "And the floating pancakes, they make it charming." Kale laughed aloud, realizing that despite the bizarre situation, he felt something he hadn't in years. The quiet comfort of someone else's presence, unpredictable but welcome. Night fell again, and Lyria prepared for rest, though she did so in her unique way, curling onto the observation platform, leaning against the edge, and using a small anti-grav pillow to float her head. Kale adjusted his own blankets, occasionally shooting her a glance as she muttered complaints about the fluffiness or lack thereof. "Next time I'll bring a properly calibrated pillow," she said, a trace of humor and mock threat in her voice. Before sleep claimed them both, Kale reflected on the odd, delicate balance they had established. Humor, trust, and curiosity were threading the day together, cushioning the inevitable dangers that always lingered outside their bubble. Lyria, despite her alien origins and long ears twitching in subtle signals, had become more than a fugitive or guest. She had become a companion in the most improbable sense, someone capable of turning a human warrior's life upside down without ever lifting a weapon. By the time the station's lights dimmed to near darkness, laughter had faded into shared silence, punctuated only by the faint hum of machinery and the occasional whisper of Lyria's voice commenting on the stars. Hale felt the edges of war and vigilance soften in her presence, the day's humor melting tension into something fragile, strange, and profoundly human. And though neither of them said it aloud, both understood that the bond they had begun to forge was not a fleeting novelty. It was the first thread in a web that could either protect them both or tangle them in ways neither had yet imagined. The station thrummed with its usual hum, the kind that felt almost sentient if one listened long enough, and Cale found himself awake before the artificial dawn. He had spent most of the night in a state of half-conscious vigilance, half-lazy amusement, watching Lyria curl into her anti-grav pillows with the precision of someone who had mastered both gravity and whimsy. Her long ears twitched occasionally, catching sounds too subtle for human ears, but she seemed calm now, even daringly relaxed, a rare display for someone hunted across star systems. Hale stretched and muttered about coffee and the impossibility of human mornings. Lyria, sensing his movement, shifted with a soft sigh, making a comment about humans being predictably sluggish until caffeine touched their bloodstream. He raised a brow. "You're judging me before I've had a sip." "I judge all humans before breakfast. It's protocol," she replied, eyes glinting with playful malice. "Your blood pressure is steady, your snack defenses are intact. You pass my initial inspection." Hale laughed, shaking his head. "I feel honored." The calm didn't last long. A sudden alert flared on the console, an unauthorized docking signal on the outer ring of the station. Hale's body, trained by years of war, shifted automatically into readiness. Lyria's ears perked sharply, glowing faintly as she rose, every movement fluid and deliberate. "They've found me," she said simply. Hale's hand hovered over the sidearm, but Lyria waved him off. "Relax, warrior, this is where the fun begins, and you try not to trip over the furniture this time." He scowled, but she was already moving toward the observation panels, fingers dancing across controls, locking doors, and rerouting security bots in a ballet of efficiency. "You're reckless," Cale muttered, though he couldn't suppress a grin at her exaggerated motions. "Reckless? Moi," she said, pretending to clutch her chest in offense. By the time the first enemy drones reached the outer docking bay, Cale and Lyria were in perfect sync. She darted from console to console, using her ear sensors to detect weak points in the drone's energy shields, while Cale fired with precise bursts, sending sparks and thrumming metal across the room. Lyria leaned out of cover, balancing with a grace that made him question gravity itself, and quipped, "You humans are dramatic when cornered, I love it." Hale snorted, ducking behind a bulkhead. "You're insane." "Maybe, but charmingly so," she called back, discharging a small pulse device that sent a drone spinning out of control and slamming into a wall with a loud clang. The battle escalated, a chaotic symphony of flashing lights, whirring machinery, and improvised maneuvers. At one point, Lyria slipped on a control panel, sending her into a slow, graceful flip that ended with her landing squarely on a hovering crate. Cale couldn't help but laugh, firing a quick salvo to cover her retreat. "You're impossible," he shouted over the clamor. "And you love it," she replied, brushing dust from her suit. When the last drone finally sparked out, their combined efforts had left the docking bay in a mess of twisted metal and faintly smoking circuits, but they had survived without injury. Lyria exhaled, dropping into a corner of the bay, and Cale leaned against a bulkhead, rubbing his arms and shaking his head in disbelief. "You're good," he admitted, genuinely impressed. She smirked. "I know, but you're better than I thought. Coordination is acceptable. Plus, your humor kept me from panicking." Cale blinked. Humor had kept her from panicking? He realized then that the lightness, the teasing, the absurd jokes over pancakes and floating books had done more than ease tension. They had built trust in the cracks of fear and uncertainty. Back in the safety of his quarters, Cale and Lyria sat among the remnants of their earlier chaos. Hollow panels flickered weakly, floating pancakes still quivered on anti-grav plates, and Cale realized he hadn't felt this alive or this human in years. Lyria curled up beside him, her ears brushing the edge of the bed in gentle, curious signals. "You fought well," he said, almost reluctantly. "I had excellent training, warrior," she replied. But your calm and absurdity, your ability to laugh while chaos happened, that saved us both. You're different than I expected. You're more human than your record suggested. Kale felt an odd warmth at her words, a mix of pride and disbelief. She tilted her head, studying him with a faintly teasing glint. And now, warrior, you owe me something. Uh-oh, Kale muttered. Not what you think, she said. You owe me pancakes tomorrow morning, properly cooked, and maybe a story about your adventures, your battles. I want to hear how humans survive when they aren't floating across star systems. Kale shook his head, smiling. I think I can manage that, though I warn you, the tales are mostly me tripping over things while trying to look heroic. You exaggerate, she replied, though her grin betrayed amusement. The night settled in again, quieter this time. Kale reflected on how much had changed in just over a day. He had gone from a soldier alone in his quarters, armored in routines and loneliness, to a man who could laugh while fighting for survival, sharing space with someone entirely alien yet profoundly familiar. Humor, trust, and unexpected companionship had revealed sides of him he had thought lost to duty and war. Lyria's presence, audacious and lighthearted, had challenged him, not in battle but in understanding, patience, and openness. He realized that bonds were forged in small moments. A floating pancake, a quip about rage in a holographic fish, a playful jab while dodging plasma fire. And perhaps that was the true lesson of the night. Strength without warmth was empty, and courage was nothing without laughter to keep it human. As dawn approached, casting simulated light across the room, Kale watched Lyria drift into sleep beside him. Her chest rose and fell in rhythm, her ears twitching occasionally as though reacting to distant sounds only she could hear. He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and felt the final, quiet satisfaction of survival, not just from enemies or interstellar dangers, but from isolation itself. I suppose we make a good team, he said softly, more to himself than to her. Lyria murmured something unintelligible in her sleep, a sound that could almost be considered agreement. Kale allowed himself a small, genuine smile. The warrior who had opened his door to an alien stranger in the night had discovered that life could be